Anna here from the Mindful Breastfeeding School, and Ilayda Gill is joining me today on the podcast and YouTube. Hi, Ilayda.
Hi.
Ilayda is a breastfeeding specialist, mindful breastfeeding practitioner, is working towards her IBCLC qualification, and she's a mum to two and lives in Rugby, Yorkshire. Thank you so much for joining me.
It's lovely to be talking to you today. And yeah, love talking about all things feeding and mindfulness.
And there you are, feeding your own little one there. So congratulations on that. I have to say, you look absolutely glowing for 8 weeks in. So love to see that big smile on your face. So tell me a little bit about your clients first. I'd love to know, who do you support in your community? What sort of needs do they have? And, what does your sort of working life look like? Obviously, you're not working very much now, but, pre-baby.
Yeah. So I work with a really big variety of clients. There's not really much support available locally here, just because it's so short staffed. The sort of the health service is really stretched. They have to cover a massive area, so people really don't get the time that they actually need. So I do see a whole host of sort of different people, people that are, breastfeeding, bottle feeding, combination feeding. I do see a big sort of variety of people with a lot of different problems, whether it's like pain, position attachment, supply problems, where, the sort of the baby's not latching, so many different things. Reflux is always a big one. That's probably my favorite topic, actually, is reflux. I find that a really interesting one, because there's always that sort of over medication of reflux problems, and often it's not necessary most of the time. So yeah, that's probably one of my favorite problems to unpick. So yeah, just a whole host of different people, unsettled baby. I quite like unpicking those kind of situations too. But yeah, there's just nothing really available here, or there's no one else sort of locally that does anything similar either. Whereas, because it's quite sort of a small rural-ish area, whereas if you sort of go into cities and stuff, there's more available. Whereas here, there's really nothing at all if you need support. So yeah, always quite busy. I do a lot of volunteer work as well. But luckily the council fund quite a lot of what I do, so that helps. So I can sort of make a lot of things free at the point of access, because the council give me funding to be able to do that. So that really helps too.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I was talking about this to some of my practitioners this morning, and saying that, there are grants and funds available, isn't there? I think that our local councils know that there's not, there's a bit of a gap, a large gap to plug. And a lot of them do have budgets and money there to help third party people such as you or I to fill them. So I always say to people, if you're wanting to get into breastfeeding support but don't necessarily feel comfortable about charging for private services, that there is that option. You can get paid to give breastfeeding support, and we should be paid to give breastfeeding support as well, just like other people who work in the NHS have a salary and wages. So I really love that. I love that you've sought that funding out so that you can help such a wide range of people.
Yeah, because we're just kind of filling a gap that they're not, and it probably costs them a lot less to fund me versus them to fund a project themselves. And obviously, we specialize in a particular area, so we deserve to be paid for something if you specialize in a topic and know so much about it.
And you've paid for your training as well. It's not and we were just talking about getting the IBCLC qualification, weren't we, and what that entails, time-wise, stress-wise, but also it's quite a big investment to make in the courses and in the exam itself. So absolutely, you're a specialist, and should be treated as such. I totally agree.
Yeah, no, definitely. I feel like it is something that's really undervalued, and it shouldn't be at all. Because everyone feeds the baby in some way, and often we need support for that. So it should be something that is valued a lot more, helping people to achieve the feeding goals.
It's very, and it starts really with our government, doesn't it? And without wanting to go on a political rant, it does start the funding. It's a healthcare issue, it's a public health issue, and therefore, you would hope that it would be an absolute priority. Everybody wins when people breastfeed, because it really helps health, in the immediate health of a baby, and also the lifelong health, and also the health of generations to come. And most people want to breastfeed. Most people want to, even if it's not fully breastfeed, most people want to provide some milk, their breast milk, to their baby. But the statistics of breastfeeding in our country is that most people end up that not being the case, because there isn't enough support. And it's a very backward step by any government who doesn't invest to help people who want to breastfeed their babies or chest feed, to be able to provide human milk for their babies. And anyway, I said I'm not going to go on a political rant, but I think most people listening to this would agree with that and feel into that. And, that sort of understanding that breastfeeding, chest feeding doesn't have to look one way, that we as specialists help people across the whole spectrum of, ways of feeding their babies. And it really should be invested in. But what I'm so pleased about is that more and more people are becoming IBCLCs. That stands for International Board Lactation Consultant, for anyone who doesn't know, or also go on specialist courses such as you have. And also there is some change, I think, in some trusts where they're understanding that breastfeeding is a specialism, lactation is a specialism, and that it needs, you can't just chuck any old person in there and expect them to know how to give good quality support. I certainly was a pediatric nurse who in the beginning didn't have the education and wasn't giving great quality support, but was very much put in a position in my job where I was expected to help people to feed their babies. So there's a long way to go, isn't there, is what I'm trying to say. But I think it's fantastic that you and so many others are so passionate about helping others to feed their baby and are going out and training up. So it's wonderful. So tell me a little bit about mindful breastfeeding, how you use it, and which bits you love best.
Yeah. So I feel like it's really important to sort of start the conversation antenatally. So I always bring it up with my antenatal clients. So I run like an antenatal course. It's about 3 hours-ish, but I always split it into about 2 sessions. So I first kind of start off with like journaling questions. That's usually right at the very beginning, after a brief introduction. And I'll ask people, what their kind of thoughts and feelings are on feeding, what their family and friends' experiences are on feeding. Do they have any kind of particular worries? Is there anything, that's bothering them? Just so then you can kind of maybe like pick up on a problem early before it happens, and then you can sort of talk through them with that. Or like, sometimes if family and friends have had negative experience as well, that can maybe play a role in feeding later on, maybe them sometimes not getting the best support sometimes, or maybe getting, incorrect information. So sort of unpicking those things, I think, is really important, and can sometimes help people to sort of, feel a lot more confident going into it afterwards. So I do feel like the journaling part is the first bit I'll do, just to see, is there anything that, might be an issue later for them, and to help them work through that. And it just helps, access those deeper thoughts. Sometimes people just haven't even thought about it at all until they've had their baby. But I was the same with my first. I was like, oh yeah, I'll breastfeed, that, that'll be nice and it'll fall into place and blah blah blah. But I didn't really give it any other thought. I just thought, I'll feed my baby and that's it. Which obviously is, it's a bit more complex than that often. So yeah, I feel like accessing those deeper thoughts is important. And
Sometimes I feel like it is just also starting that level of communication between couples, if they're in a partnership, and often they haven't really had that discussion beyond, what you're saying, are we going to breastfeed or not, or that sort of almost like it's a choice that you just make in pregnancy and then off you go. But it's like you say, there's we all come to it with our own infant feeding stories, don't we? Whether we've fed babies before, however we were fed ourselves, all of that stuff is all this kind of big jumble. And you're right, like accessing it can be such a great way, well, it is a great way to start off your infant feeding journey with your own baby, because then you have got those things out to the surface, whereas sometimes what can happen is they can come up like during struggles or at some other point, or they can cause struggles, but yeah, by having them all out in the open and having that open, honest discussion about them makes, yeah, I agree, it makes such a big difference.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like as well, it's nice sometimes to see that shift in what you kind of, I always ask people what they thought pre-pregnancy versus when they're pregnant, like how's that thought pattern changed. It's quite interesting to see, has it changed or not. Often I find it has, that people might have like quite different feelings before they had a baby versus, when they're expecting one. So I find that to be quite interesting too. And I'll also kind of talk about as well, what mindfulness actually is. I think that's important too, and how it relates to breastfeeding. So I have that in the second session, that I'll talk about, being in like the sympathetic nervous system, and negatively affect feeding because of oxytocin versus, we want to be in the parasympathetic nervous system where oxytocin can flow and can feel like calm, connected and relax, and the milk flows because oxytocin's flowing. So I sort of talk about how the two relate, and I'll kind of briefly touch on like breathing techniques, kind of relaxations, how those things can sort of help to increase oxytocin. And then I'll do like an affirmations activity with them as well, because often, we have lots of like negative thoughts jumbling around, and they can be quite repetitive. And I've heard you talk about before how, we're just told not to like trust our bodies, and all our life we're fed this message of like, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, and then you're told to all of a sudden like shift that message to something else. Oh, trust your body now, it knows what it's doing, and it can be really difficult to make that shift. So yeah, that's the main kind of antenatal stuff I'll do with the mindfulness. And
it's such a different way of doing antenatal breastfeeding education, isn't it? Because so often I did an antenatal breastfeeding class. I can't remember it. I mean, it was 16 years ago, probably almost now, but I don't really remember it. I don't think I really remember much from that I learned even after my baby was born. I think it was a lot of practical stuff, but also a lot of like, just, it will all happen, like all the trust your body stuff that you were mentioning. And I think as much as it was helpful in some ways, I'm sure, mindset wise, there wasn't a lot of mental, mindful preparation for that 4th trimester period. And yeah, I did so much for the birth. I focused on that so much. And I think it's really important that we don't just give people a whole bunch of practical information about breastfeeding, because bodies and babies are different anyway, so it's different for everybody, but also I don't think people remember it.
No, I don't think so either. I remember like all I took from mine was, feed every 3 hours, okay, and then that was it, which most babies feed a lot more than that anyway, but that's all I kind of took, was feed every 3 hours, okay, that's fine, and nothing else really went in other than that.
Yeah, so I think, I agree. I think when it comes to antenatal education, when it comes to infant feeding, it's about uncovering those stories, perhaps using those stories to then write some notice any negative thought patterns, and then see if you can change them into more positive ones. I really love that. And of course it's really useful for us to teach people how their lactating bodies work as well. How does the breast work? How does, why is a deep latch important? That stuff is really useful to know as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like, obviously postnatally as well, the tools are so important. I know really focus on like pumping parents as well, the mindfulness tools, and how to sort of help them make pumping like, sustainable, comfortable, like a positive experience, because often it can be exhausting and tiring. Often a lot of people don't really enjoy doing it, and sort of kind of try and condition the oxytocin response a bit more, and do things to help oxytocin flow. Whereas if you've got your baby, if you're cuddling them, the oxytocin will flow easier. So I
So
was
true. And so many people who pump are in perhaps quite stressful situations, especially in the beginning, like either they're separated from their baby, or maybe they are, they've got a low supply and it's been suggested for them to pump to increase the supply. So all of those situations are quite stressful and mentally can kind of put you in a negative space. So you're right, by understanding the mind-body connection and the nervous system and how those can interlink, I think it really helps. Then the mindful breastfeeding tools then really help parents to either increase their supply or feel better about their situation, and there's a lot of self-compassion, isn't there, in what we do. So it's a lot of that sort of kindness and acceptance around where you're at, which is where the mindful bit comes in. Yeah,
yeah.
I really like that. What about you? So now you've had another baby since you trained in mindful breastfeeding. Are you using any tools at all for yourself?
Yeah. So initially, so the birth, like the labor was quite long, but it was a really positive experience. It was everything I wanted and more. But she came out quite quickly, so she had a lot of bruising on her cheeks. So initially, she couldn't really open her mouth very wide. So I was experiencing quite a lot of pain, like to the point where I was literally like wincing. It was that bad, which it wasn't nice at the time, but I feel like work-wise, it's helped me for for other people that are in that kind of situation, how much pain that someone might be in. So I found the breathing techniques to really help, that I could just sort of then focus on like my body and the lungs and the breath rather than sort of focusing on the pain. So I was in a lot of pain for the first week, and the after pains, I knew they got worse with each baby, but I didn't think they're going to be that bad, because it was to the point where I was like, is this normal? It was awful. But the breathing techniques really got me through that, just to sort of just breathe through it, practice the breathing I'd been doing beforehand, and so letting the oxytocin wave flow. That really helped us, really deep breaths in and out. So that's the main tool that I've used was the breathing, but also like the guided relaxations I found as well help, especially when you've got two, that it's difficult to then sort of get that time for yourself. So I find it's important to sort of make that space. It might not be every day, because it can be chaos sometimes, but when I can, just to sort of listen to a guided relaxation, sort of just take myself away for a minute and just be and feel like calm and connected. And I remember before you talked about how we should take a feed each day, like not be distracted by like your phone or a book or the TV, and just be there and watch your baby and just be really present for the feed. So I do that every day. I always make sure that there's at least a feed where I'm just really just focusing on her and just cuddles and being in that oxytocin bubble together. So that's another tool that I really enjoy using. So I think it's really important, because we do get sort of taken away with technology and things rather than being like present in the moment.
Yeah, I think I think phones can be wonderful, our access to the outside world when we're kind of relentlessly looking after children and all that entails. So I remember when my daughter was little, when she was about a toddler, me and my husband used to sort of argue over who would sit in her room to settle her to bed, because that's when you could sit and catch up on your phone. So we'd like always be wanting to do it. But I think what I'm interested in actually is asking you, how does it differ from with your first baby? Would you have made the time then? Would you have thought about it as a sort of priority to look after your own sort of mental well-being by carving out some time, do you think?
I feel like then I don't know, I didn't really do anything like that, or like I just wasn't really aware of like the power of like mindfulness tools, that like I'd maybe sort of sit and watch Netflix for a little bit, but otherwise I wouldn't really do anything like that. And I remember sort of first coming across it and thinking, oh, it's a bit odd kind of thing. But then once I actually got into it, I was like, no, it actually does make a really big difference. Like you can sort of be feeling not great, a bit stressed and a bit frazzled, and feel so much more like calm and relaxed afterwards, and be in such a better headspace. So I just wasn't really familiar with anything like that at the time.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's something that I sort of do quite a lot, and I feel like it is important, and I do prioritize it, and having that time to sort of have, for me, because I mean, self-care, it's not like an indulgence, is it?
No.
It's a necessity. You need to be sort of taking care of yourself, otherwise it's really difficult to take care of other people.
Mm.
So yeah, I always do make sure that I make that time for myself. I think it's really, really important. And in my
Yeah.
work as well, that I'll always sort of say to clients, it's important to have that you time, like not like cleaning or going shopping, that sometimes often as parents we're told if you're doing that by yourself that's self-care, because it's not.
No, it's not. It may
um,
be enjoyable, it may be nice to get a bit of a break out of the house, but it's not. No, it isn't self-care. You're right. Or having a shower or whatever, the basics.
yeah.
No, you're so right.
But yeah, I feel like it's so important to have that you time.
Mm.
It's needed for sure.
Absolutely. So what is coming up for you? I mean, you've got an 8-week-old, so probably not much for the first half of the year. But what's coming up for you, in 2022? What's happening for your business, or do you have any new plans?
Yes, so I'm shifting my focus. My focus before was kind of local work. And I think I want my main focus to be social media instead. I feel like that's where there's, you can reach a much wider audience. So that's what I've been really focusing on now. I feel a bit sorry for her because she's like my social media content for the next like 10 years. So I'm like taking pictures and videos of absolutely everything, feeding wise. Because I feel like, it's nice to sort of then see pictures of like real people, and feeding and different situations. So yeah, social media is going to be my main focus. I want to sort of bring out, I mean, I do online workshops anyway, but I wanted to sort of be able to make like them much more accessible. So be able to do like group online workshops, be able to buy like a pre-recorded version. So just things like introducing solids, antenatal. I wanted to do like mindfulness, going back to work, just covering all kind of bases, of things that people want to know more about and get support with.
Well, I'm going to share all your links below so people can come and find you, but just tell us where we find you.
On Instagram, infant feeding with Ilayda, and the same on Facebook as well.
Oh, brilliant. That's great. I think that sounds really, really exciting. And I think, again, we talk a lot at the Mindful Breastfeeding School about building up a subconscious picture of breastfeeding, and also nothing beats, learning about breastfeeding from other breastfeeding parents. So I just think those visuals are so vital, and I share them all the time with my clients. It's probably, when I first started off sort of as an IBCLC about 6 years ago, a lot of stuff was on, written information, but now I just pretty much share videos because I just think you can't beat it. And so I think how amazing that you can make those for yourself, to use and to share with others. What a lovely thing to do for people.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks so much for joining me, and I've really enjoyed our chat. I'm very excited to see what happens over the next year with all the support that you provide. And yeah, I'll see you soon.
Thank you. It's been amazing talking to you.
Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your spending your time here. If you'd like to know more, a good place to start would be with the Mindful Breastfeeding book. It's available from Amazon around the world, and it's a short interactive guide to mindful breastfeeding with journaling and guided relaxations, and just more talk on the importance of having a calm and connected infant feeding experience. You can find our website at www.mindfulbreastfeedingschool.com. The link is below, and on there you'll get access to our practitioners directory. So if you as a parent and you'd like to work with somebody who's trained in mindful breastfeeding skills, as well as all the practical skills as well, to be able to help you on your infant feeding journey, then you will find someone you can work with there. They also run classes as well as one-to-one sessions, so go and have a look around. And you can find access to our courses. So if you are somebody who would like to add mindful breastfeeding to your practice, then please do come and find our courses. We've got free training on there for professionals and birth workers, as well as access to be able to talk to me. So do leave me messages, do get in touch on social media. All the links are below. I look forward to hearing from you.